rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you for joining me on Wednesday's edition of End of the Age. I'm Dave Robbins with Endtime Ministries, and I'm filling in for Irvin today. Irvin will be back on the radio tomorrow. He's been at a meeting here in Dallas with Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey had a huge meeting about leadership and different things, and so Irvin and his nephew Vince Stegall went down there to be at that meeting with Dave Ramsey, George Bush, and a lot of other people. So I think y'all will be interested to hear what he has to say about that meeting tomorrow. So you're stuck with me today, and I want to thank you for joining me. I'm going to talk about the world government today, and it's already formed and established and functioning in our world today. And it's prophesied in the Bible. 2,000 years ago, the Apostle John prophesied that there would be a world government ruling the entire earth just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Well, the prophecy is found in Revelation chapter 13, and it provides us with a glimpse of what the world governing entity, number one, what it will look like, what its goals are, and who is the mastermind behind it. Of course, you know the goal of it is probably it's very self-evident that the goal is to get everybody on earth to pledge their allegiance to this one world governing body. Now, the Antichrist will eventually sit at the helm of this. And so, but the Antichrist is not the mastermind behind it. The Bible says that the dragon, or Satan, gave this entity his seat, his power, and his great authority. So the mastermind behind the world governing body mentioned in Revelation chapter 13 is Satan. Satan's the mastermind behind the whole thing because his goal is to get everybody to worship him through this one world governing system and his ambassador in the end time, which will be the Antichrist. So as I speak to you today, this global governing entity is already established. It's gaining in power more and more every day as nations yield up their sovereignty to its ever-encroaching tentacles going all around the world. And believe me, every nation on earth is yielding up their sovereignty all the time in different treaties and different things that they sign. So there are many names for this world governing body in the news, but they're all referring to the same thing. People call it different things. You might call it global governance. You might call it world government or refer to it as globalization or the process of global wealth redistribution, or simply call it the United Nations. But they all mean the same thing. So when you read your news, think about all of those terms because they're mentioned in the news all the time. They all refer to the same thing. It's a world government that has been established to govern every citizen on the planet. Nobody be left out. That's the goal, is to get every nation and every citizen to yield up their sovereignty and pledge allegiance to this one world governing body. And you can see it. Read Revelation chapter 13. The Antichrist, this one world governing system, they're going to have, the Bible talks about how this is going to function in the end times. And the goal is to get everybody to yield up their sovereignty and pledge allegiance to this one world governing body. So on September 24th, 2012, to show you what I'm talking about, the Council on Foreign Relations published an article titled, "The United Nations and the Future of Global Governance." The article stated, "In our rapidly globalized world, the challenges to humankind are a myriad and complex. The task for global governance is to focus on the interconnectedness and interdependence of all these challenges and threats. It needs to provide the international community. I want you to remember that phrase throughout the rest of the program and when you do your research. The international community. It's a very subtle phrase, but remember that term. Provide the international community with a roadmap leading to the ultimate goal of sustainable peace and development. And with the rise of emerging powers, the need for a new global architecture has become even more urgent and critical. So the Council on Foreign Relations put this out a few years ago, but they refer to the international community and that we need to provide them a path forward so that they can have a greater grasp or a grip on the governance of the world. Well, today I want to focus on the term international community. I did a search on the web just before I came in here, and there's like 177 million searches or different pages and different things concerning the international community on the web. So it's all over. If you listen to a speech at the United Nations General Assembly in September every year, almost every speech will mention something about the international community, because all the nations of the earth at this point, they're buying into it. They all signed on to the Sustainable Development Goals adopted in September of last year. So all of the nations on earth are buying into this at this point. And so, it's the world government. So it's a true world government that will govern every aspect of life on earth. That's what the Sustainable Development Goals are designed to do, is to govern everyone, even your localities, what you do with your land, how you produce things, what you consume, electricity, food, anything. They want to govern every aspect of your life, and it's already happening as we speak. Everything points back to the one world government. Think about it. The war on global warming, which is a complete hoax, the political and economical conflicts around the world, global hunger, human production, human consumption, the oceans, which cover about, 70% of the Earth's total, the surface of the Earth, religious conflicts, disarmament, inequality, and education, and among other things. They all are being governed by the United Nations or the current world government in some form or fashion around the world. And if they're not right now, they're trying to do that. You can look up, it's all over the internet. Go to the United Nations websites, read the articles about that. They're endeavoring to govern your life and my life. Even though we signed a Declaration of Independence, they don't care about that. Our current administration doesn't care about that. And so that's one of the reasons this presidential election coming up in November is very, very, very critical for this nation. Because there's some candidates that are wanting to just say, just yield up our sovereignty. And there's possibly maybe a candidate that might not want to do that. So we need to be prayerful and ask God to let His will be done in that situation. But that's not the reason for my program today. I'm focusing on world government and the term international community. We hear it all the time. You hear world leaders talk about, well, the international community needs to intervene and take care of this, needs to intervene and help feed the people in South Africa, or they need to help this equality issue, or there's a nuclear situation going on, the international community needs to intervene. They're referring to world government. So all the world leaders know exactly what the world government is. It's the New World Order and the process of globalization. They know what it is, and they have all pledged their allegiance to it. However, the term world government or global governance, it seems too intrusive. So globalists and internationalists, or those who seek to run the world and have a world government, they came up with a more subtle term, which is being used more and more for that same world government, and that is the international community. It's very important that you understand that term. So let's talk about the international community or the world government. When you're watching your news at night, or when you're doing your research, when you're reading Jerusalem Post or Debka File, Israel International News, Washington Post, New York Times, and a world leader says, we're calling on the international community to come and handle this problem. They're calling on the world government. And I'm hopefully going to be able to prove that to you before I'm done with the program today. So in an effort to help explain what I'm talking about, I have a question. How does President Obama refer to the world government handling conflicts and other issues around the world? He calls on the international community. Now, I'm talking about the President of the United States. I'm not talking about the President of Uruguay or Brazil or of Germany. I'm talking about the President of the United States calls on the international community all the time. This is in March of 2012, the Washington Post ran an article that stated, the title was, Obama in Syria, What's an International Community? The article states, what's happening in Syria this is Obama, is heartbreaking and outrageous. And what you've seen is the international community mobilize against the Assad regime. President Obama made that statement at a news conference in March 6th of 2012. Well, of course, the article goes on to say, befitting a one-time community organizer, the president likes to use the phrase international community a lot. In his news conference on Tuesday, the president 12 times used the phrase international community or world community or community of nations. It's all the same thing. During the news conference, Obama used virtually the same phrasing, the international community, to describe the struggle against the late Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi and the Syrian ruler Bashar Assad. The two statements are, what happened in Libya, this is what Obama said, what happened in Libya was that we mobilized the international community, and then going to Syria, he said, what you've seen is the international community mobilize against the Assad regime. So he uses this term international community all the time. What's he referring to? The world governing body. That's exactly what he's talking to. Hey, we came together and we handled this issue. But of course, in the case of Libya, the president noted, we had a UN Security Council mandate or a world government mandate for military actions. The United States went to the UN Security Council and got a mandate to invade Libya. Well, left unsaid is the fact that Russia and China at that time vetoed a U.S. proposed resolution on Syria. Remember when our battleships were sitting out there ready to bomb Syria in the Mediterranean Sea, and China and Russia both vetoed that? Well, that's nothing we could do because the UN Security Council, the mandate was rendered useless because they have veto power. But the UN Security Council mandate, what do they mean by that? They mean world government. So the veto of the resolution at that time undercut a diplomatic push by the Arab League to secure the 15-nation council's support of a plan that requires Assad to yield power and prepare the country for the democratic elections. So it was all rendered. We were ready to go in and bomb them. China and Russia vetoed that. We had to turn around, and our ships headed back out into the Atlantic Ocean. So the failure to secure Russian and Chinese support on Syria at that time stood in stark contrast to another vexing foreign policy issue in which Obama evoked the international community, the Iranian nuclear program. In the case of Iran, Russia has been generally supportive, even more so than China. Both countries have also participated in 7-nation talks designed to halt Iran's uranium enrichment program. What are they talking about when they talk about the international community intervening? They're all talking about the world government. We've had to get permission from this world governing body to go in and attack a nation. The United States of America. Think about that. It's the world government that's already established and in power. There is somebody who we are getting permission from to go into military conflict. Then on September 25th, 2014 on NPR, Obama called on the international community to fight Ebola. So he called on them originally to go in and take care of a military conflict that was going on, the civil war, what was going on with Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, and then the civil war in Syria. And then now he's calling on the international community to fight Ebola. It states that President Obama urged the international community to join the United States in trying to stop the Ebola epidemic in West Africa, saying that the disease could kill hundreds of thousands of people in the coming months if it was left unchecked. Who is President Obama really calling on to fight Ebola? He's calling on the world government. Why? Because there's a world government already established. He's not going to say, I'm calling on the world government on national news. So he's calling on the international community, which means a world government. Then on September 3rd of 2014, in the Weekly Standard, Obama stated that ISIS, a manageable problem, it is a manageable problem if the international community comes together. So the article states, speaking earlier this morning in Estonia, President Obama addressed dealing with ISIS. He talked of making ISIS a manageable problem if the international community would work together. He stated that we know that if we are joined by the international community, we can continue to shrink ISIL's sphere of influence if effectiveness, its financing, its effectiveness, its financing, its military capabilities to the point where it is a manageable problem, Obama stated. And the question is going to be making sure that we've got the right strategy, but also making sure we've got the international will to do it. This is something that is a continuation of a problem we've seen certainly since 9/11. But before, and it continues to metastasize in different ways. And what we've got to do is to make sure that we are organizing the Arab world, the Middle East, the Muslim world, along with the international community to isolate this cancer. So what's President Obama talking about when he refers to the international will? He's talking about the world government. If it's the will of the world government, then we can manage ISIS, which of course they found out that's easier said than done. But the world government actually has a will, and that is to govern every area of the planet. And whether it be military conflicts between nations or the outbreak of a virus, Obama wants the international community to handle it. They also want global governance over the Earth's oceans. On February 2014, the IIP Digital, which is sponsored by the U.S. Department of State, they had an article that stated, who might govern the oceans? Well, the article states that covering more than 70% of the globe's surface, the oceans are Earth's largest habitat, supporting nearly 50% of all the species, and they are the controlling forces in planetary climate and the source of food, jobs, and resources for billions of people. Unsustainable and destructive practices cause well-documented damage to oceans. Well, the world government obviously must have a solution, right? So what is it? Well, at this meeting, The Economist and the National Geographic hosted a meeting at the World Oceans Summit. And U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry was among the keynote speakers. During his speech, Mr. Kerry identified three main problems threatening the oceans. Number one was overfishing. Number two was pollution and garbage. And three was debris and fertilizers. And then another one was greenhouse gas emissions. Well, the summit attendees discussed ideas for global oceanic enforcement mechanisms, or global governance of the oceans, perhaps under the United Nations umbrella, the world government, and they questioned the Secretary of State about governance. Well, Kerry said that both he and President Obama supported, now we're talking about the President of the United States, supported the notion of an enforcement mechanism, but how to achieve that is another question. He states, how will we enforce regulations and what rules will we put into force in place in order to preserve our fisheries and manage our coastlines and do the things necessary to reduce the pollution and preserve these, Kerry asked. Well, it's going to take some kind of a global understanding. But Kerry also acknowledged, I know people resist and hate the idea of global governance can violate national concerns about maintaining the sovereignty and coastal economic zones designated by other international agreements. The many industries with maritime interest are cautious about proposals that can complicate their operations or erode their profits. Secretary Kerry said that the United Nations provides the obvious global structure to establish a better system of oceanic governance. He's talking about world government, global governance. But it has a huge, what we need, huge global cooperation, and it will absolutely be necessary to get there. Kerry said representatives from the many ocean interests must come together to find shared and enforceable solutions. So they're not only talking about the world government helping to solve global military conflicts and different diseases, they're also talking about governing the oceans. Why? Because the world government wants to manage and control every aspect of life and the planet. That's the goal. There are people who want to do that. Internationalists, globalists, people who believe in a world government. And this world governing entity is prophesied in the Bible by John in Revelation chapter 13 about 2,000 years ago. It goes on to state that the U.S. Department of State will attempt to set the international community on that course of managing the oceans of the world in another ocean conference in June. The international community, what is that? What are they wanting to manage the oceans of the world? It's the world government. But they're okay with saying the international community. They won't come right out and say the world government. It's like when they had problems with global warming and they were proving that wrong and it was a hoax. They changed from global warming to climate change because it's much more subtle and people think, well, the climate changes, yeah, there's got to be some things going on. So it's a soft sell. Well, that's what they're doing with international community. When you're doing your research, when you're watching the television, the news, whatever, and you see the term international community, think in your mind world government. The international community wants to manage the lives of every single person on earth. So let's talk about the United Nations new agenda, Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In September of last year, 193 member states of the United Nations adopted the new global plan to transform or govern the entire world. The document's called Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It gives the international community more power to control the lives of every individual person on earth. The document actually states the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and 169 targets which they are announcing today, at that time in September, they demonstrate the scale and ambition of this new universal agenda. It's an agenda for the entire world. It's a global agenda. The new agenda is guided by the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations, including full respect for international law. The Charter for the United Nations was designed, the entity was designed from its inception to be a world governing socialistic body. And we're going to learn that as we go on throughout the program. It goes on to state that we will work with local authorities and communities to renew and plan our cities and human settlements so as to foster community cohesion and personal security and to stimulate innovation and employment. What are they talking about? The United Nations wants to govern our cities. My little town of Wiley, Texas, your little town of Richmond, Indiana, or Fountain City, Indiana, or Williamsburg, Indiana. They don't care how small it is. They want to govern every single thing you do. It's called the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, transforming our world. What do they want to do? They want their world government to be able to manage you and every aspect of your life. Housed within this document are 17 Sustainable Development Goals that the international community are going to strive to accomplish by the year 2030, or 14 years from now. The goals include such items as climate change, ending global poverty, which is going to mean wealth redistribution, ending global hunger, ensure healthy lives. They're going to force all of you to pay for your health care. Has that happened in America yet? Think about it. And achieve gender equality. Look at all of these gender issues we have going on in the United States right now. Governance and consumption and production. They want to govern what you consume and the way you produce things. They want their grip on your company. They want to govern the oceans and to have greater global governance of our societies concerning sustainable development. The smart meters and all these different things are put on your home to manage how much electricity you use. It went so far as that, and most companies have already accepted this, and not companies, but most organizations around the world, huge global organizations, that the International Labor Organization actually stated the new universal agenda for sustainable development is excellent news. The unanimous endorsement from UN member states gives the international community, there it is again, or the world government, the impetus we need to work together to tackle the formidable challenges confronting humanity and our planet, particularly those we face in the world of work. They want to manage your businesses. All these huge corporate businesses, they don't want you working and making a huge profit. You're making too much money. We need to share that with people who are not, these underdeveloped countries. It's called wealth redistribution. You're making too much money. Capitalism's working too good. So we need to do away with that. So when we continue on in the program, I'm going to describe the world government, how it started. We'll talk about the United Nations and how it all began, where it came from, and what it's designed to do. It's a world government. They don't call it that. They don't like to call it world government. It's too intrusive. So they like to call it the international community.
When current events are found in Bible prophecy, it's astonishing. At Endtime Ministries, we are seeing them unfold every day, and so can you. We've put together a current events in Bible prophecy package for anyone who wants to understand like never before. Irvin Baxter and his dedicated staff have spent hundreds of hours of research and study, and in doing so have discovered that current events in Bible prophecy are telling the same story. These 13 DVDs will prepare you to be ready in this extraordinary time that God has destined you to live. Call 1-800-ENDTIME or go to endtime.com and save over 20% when you buy the current events in Bible prophecy package.
All my life I have heard the statement, nobody's perfect. But one day Hebrews 10:14 caught my attention. It says, "For by one offering he hath perfected forever them that are sanctified." I attempted to reconcile this statement with what I had viewed as the many imperfections in myself. Could it be that there are human beings on this earth that God considers perfect? In You Are Perfect, Irvin Baxter explains what it means to be sanctified and why God sees those that are sanctified as perfect. This teaching has given people peace and security in their walk with God because of new understanding of how God sees them. This lesson is available on DVD, CD, imprinted format, or even digital download, to tell you not what's wrong with you, but what's right with you. You are perfect. Call 1-800-ENDTIME or go to endtime.com to get yours today.
If your radio station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com to continue to listen to today's broadcast.
Well, welcome back, everybody. We're talking about the world government today, prophesied by John 2,000 years ago in the book of Revelation, chapter 13, and how they won't come right out and say, hey, this is a world government and we're going to do this. They're saying, hey, we need the international community to intervene. They have a much more subtle term. So imagine if they called it the world government. People would resist it. So that's why we hear the term all the time, international community, so often in the news. We need the international community to convene or to intervene on this, or let's consult the international community. So Who do leaders think should preside? Let's talk about all of the areas, the conflicts that are going on the earth, what all they want to do. Everything points back to, in some form or fashion, to this world governing body. Well, who do global leaders think should preside over the Israeli-Palestinian peace process? Because it's a huge conflict in the world. It's one of the major conflicts. And the world governing body, the world leaders have tried to wrestle with this for decades now. Who do they think should preside over that process? The international community. Let's look at it. The Egyptian president recently called on the Israelis and Palestinians to take historic steps to peace. Egyptian President Fattah al-Sisi made an unusual impromptu appeal on Tuesday to both Israelis and Palestinians to take historic steps for peace, just as his country had done in 1979. He states, if by our combined efforts and real desire, we can all achieve a solution to this problem and find hope for the Palestinians and security for the Israelis, history will write a new page that will be no less and might even be more of an achievement than the signing of the peace treaty between Egypt and the Israelis 40 years ago. There's currently an Arab initiative, and think about this. Look at all these initiatives that are trying to get a peace deal signed. There's currently an Arab initiative, a French initiative, there are American efforts, and then there is the quartet that they're all working towards, the Middle East quartet, they're all working towards a solution on the Israeli-Palestinian issue. In Egypt, we do not intend on playing a leading role or to be leaders of this issue, but we are prepared to exert all efforts that will contribute to the founding of a solution to this problem. Listen to what he says. It's the international community that should determine what is right and what isn't. With regard to the French initiative, Abbas said, the French plan is a good one since we want the international community to take responsibility for this endless conflict. We want the whole world by our side. We are one of the last remaining nations that suffer under military occupation. So what are they saying here? They're calling on the international community to oversee this process to make sure that happens. What are they talking about? Remember, what are they talking about when they're talking about the international community? They're talking about world government. Then the next article states Netanyahu tells the French Prime Minister Valls he doesn't want an international peace summit, talking about what's going on in France and their peace summit coming up June 3rd. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected a French proposal for a Middle East peace conference on Monday, suggesting instead direct talks between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Direct negotiations are the only way to achieve peace, Netanyahu said. We will not achieve it through a UN-style international conference or dictates from the international community regarding our security. So Netanyahu said, we're not going to buckle to the will of the world government. We want to have negotiations. That's the only way we're going to have peace. He's saying that peace can only be achieved through direct negotiations in which the Palestinians have to decide whether they recognize the state of Israel or continue to hope that it will vanish. We want two states for two people and a demilitarized Palestinian state that recognizes the Jewish state. The Palestinian Authority has preferred an international peace process or one dictated by the world government, largely because many countries seek Israel's return to pre-67 borders and a halt to Jewish settlements in East Jerusalem and the West Bank. Israel has said that turning to the international community or the world government allows the Palestinians to bypass talks of substance. So they're referring to, Netanyahu knows that he doesn't want to get sucked up into the jaws of the world government or the international community because he knows that he's going to have to go back to pre-67 borders and Israel's not, they're indefensible borders. He said, we're not going to do that. We need to sit down at the table and negotiate. What's he referring to when he refers to the international community? The world government. The next article is Kerry. Secretary of State John Kerry, the two-state solution requires a global push. John Kerry is still set on a peace deal discussing the French initiative, and he says that an international effort is necessary among the reports of Obama's UN plans. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry told a press conference in Paris on Sunday, this has been a few weeks ago now, that America is still set on forcing Israel and the Palestinians into a peace deal, but that global efforts would be needed. His reference to the global community comes in the wake of a Wall Street Journal report last week, which cited senior U.S. officials revealing the U.S. President Barack Obama intends to use the UN to divide Jerusalem. Well, according to the officials, Obama intends to no longer veto anti-Israel resolutions at the UN Security Council and thereby pressure Israel into concessions. What's he talking about when he's talking about the international community and the UN Security Council? He's talking about the world governing body. It's very simple. When they talk about international community, globalization, New World Order, all of those terms, global governance, it's the world government prophesied by John 2,000 years ago that would be in power at the time of the second coming of Jesus Christ. And it's in power right now. Think of it. You've heard it, the New World Order. The New World Order is world government. We hear the term international community more frequently today than ever before. But what is the international community? Well, the international community is simply, like I've said, world government. However, it's not just any world government. It's the world government of the Antichrist. This world government's being formed right now, and it's prophesied in the Bible. The prophecy's found in, like I said, Revelation chapter 3, verse 1 through 2. It states, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, feet as the feet of the bear, mouth of the lion. The dragon gave him his power, his seat, and his great authority." So is this world governing body a good thing? No. The Bible says Satan is the mastermind behind this one world government. So let's talk about the one world government established in our world today. The United Nations is the only structure for one world government presently on earth. What is the origin of the UN? It's a great question. Well, World War I, also called the Great War, was the worst war the world had ever known at that point. Prior to this war, there'd never been a war that had over 1 million casualties, but World War I resulted in 8.2 million dead. No other conflict on earth had ever come close to that. The world said, this can never happen again. It was from this that the idea of the establishment of a structure for global security was birthed. The structure became known as the League of Nations. Well, the League of Nations was formed in an attempt to ensure another world war would never be fought. U.S. President Woodrow Wilson championed the idea, but the U.S. Congress hesitated at the idea of being part of a world government. They didn't want it at that time. They did not want to surrender U.S. sovereignty, so they voted it down. Because Wilson could not carry his own government into the League of Nations, it quickly dismantled and fell apart. Well, 20 years later, however, the unthinkable happened, World War II, and it ended with 52 million casualties. Well, the cry for world security became louder than ever, and Franklin D. Roosevelt actually believed in it. He was responsible for the term New World Order being printed on the back of the U.S. dollar bill. Well, at the end of World War II, Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt came together at Yalta in an effort to end all war. It was during these meetings that the charter for the concept of a global governing structure called the United Nations was written. One key American man responsible for the formation of the United Nations was Alger Hiss. Remember that name. Go do your research. Alger Hiss. He organized the American delegation and served and was the acting Secretary General at the first UN meeting, although you'll never see his name there today. Hiss also served on the steering and executive committees and was charged with the responsibility of actually writing the current charter for the United Nations. After playing such a dominant role in developing the charter of the UN and in the founding conference, 3 years later, he was convicted in U.S. courts of lying to cover his activities as a communist spy. So a communist spy wrote the current charter for the United Nations, the one they still adhere to. Well, previous to this, Alger Hiss accompanied President Franklin D. Roosevelt to the Yalta Conference, where the carving up of Europe by the United States and Russia actually took place. At this time, Roosevelt was a dying man. Consequently, Alger Hiss carried the bulk of the negotiations for America. What Russia did not win on the battlefield, she won at the peace table because her own agent, Alger Hiss, was assisting Roosevelt with the negotiations. They had both the same people on both sides of the table. And of course, that explains why Russia received so many concessions at the peace table at the end of World War II. Well, think about Alger Hiss, a convicted communist spy. He designed the United Nations to be a global union of socialist republics, the current United Nations. The emblem of the Soviet Union is a globe with two sheaves of wheat around it, and with the hammer and sickle superimposed in it. And the emblem of the United Nations is also a globe with two olive branches around it. And when the insignia of the United Nations was designed, the hammer and sickle, obviously they had to leave that off because it would have been too obvious at that point. However, Alger Hiss designed the structure of the United Nations to ultimately become a world socialistic government. Well, Alger Hiss went to prison, but the UN continued to be a structure for the one world governmental system. So now remember, the current charter for the United Nations, not one word of that has changed. And the United Nations still adheres to that charter, and it was designed from its inception to be a socialistic one world governing body. Well, one of the things I want to read you that really helps you understand what's going on here is on September 12th I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to read this when we get back from the break because I won't have time to get through all of it. So let me recap what we're talking about today, and then when I come back from the break, I'll read you what the Council on Foreign Relations published. We know that there's a world governing. A world government was prophesied by John 2,000 years ago in Revelation chapter 13, and it would be in power, and the Antichrist would sit at the helm of that just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Folks, listen to me. The world government that John prophesied about is already in power. The United Nations is that one world governing body. Alger Hiss, who was a convicted communist spy, wrote the charter for the United Nations, the current charter that the United Nations adheres to. The United Nations, from its inception, was created to be a one world socialistic governing body.
One day I was listening to End of the Age, much like you are now, when a commercial came on about the Salvation Package. It's a set of 4 DVDs in which Irvin teaches about topics like Nicodemus' question to Jesus, "What must I do to be born again?" I remember Irvin said in the commercial, "If you don't love the truth, don't get this because it will make you mad." Well, I was hungry for the truth, so I did get it, and I'm so glad I did. I'd been studying the Bible for many years, but learned there was more in the scriptures about what it means to be born again. When the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" Jesus said, "Take heed of false teaching, for many will come in my name and deceive many." Now I know what Jesus was talking about when he made that statement, and I won't be deceived. The salvation package changed my life and my eternity. I'm so thankful for that commercial I heard. That's why today I wanted to record one too, for someone out there listening, searching for the truth. You will find it in the salvation package. Get the 4 DVD set for $65 or the individual DVDs for $20 each.
Well, welcome back, everybody. I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you today, but I want you to understand that the world government prophesied by John 2,000 years ago to be in power just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ It's already been established. The Antichrist will take power of that in the near future and rule that world governing body all the way to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And so it's very important that we know about that, because every person on earth is going to be asked to pledge allegiance to this one world governing body at some point. And that's something you can never do. And we'll talk about it on future programs. Why can't you do that? What will happen if you pledge allegiance to that? Obviously, it's not going to be a good thing for you at the second coming of Jesus Christ. You can't pledge allegiance to that. It's a totally godless entity. And so that's something you could never pledge allegiance to. You say, well, pledge allegiance, what do you mean? Well, like I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God. If they ever took the term one nation under God out of that, I couldn't say that pledge anymore. Because I've pledged my allegiance to God, to Jesus Christ. And I've not pledged my allegiance to anything else. Now, I love America and I'll stand for America, but my allegiance is to God. And so if they ever ask me to pledge my allegiance to the United Nations or a world governing body or a world leader, can't do that. So you need to be able to recognize what these things are so that you absolutely never do that, because it's of eternal consequence. You can't do that. So you need to be able to recognize it. So just because they don't say one world government in the Washington Post today, they have no problem saying the international community. But now you know that it's the world government that's been established for years now. So on September 12th of 2012, the Council on Foreign Relations published an article titled "The United Nations and the Future of Global Governance." At the beginning of the program, I read you a short excerpt from that article, but I want to read you some more, because it's not only talking about the international community, but they actually get into the United Nations Charter, and I want you to hear the importance that they put on this United Nations Charter. And remember, always remember, the United Nations Charter today was written by a convicted communist spy, Alger Hiss. And it was written, it was established, it was pinned to be, it was created to be a socialistic one world governing body from the very beginning. And we're seeing it happen now. It's happening all over the world. So, an excerpt from this article states that the original United Nations Charter, which you now know was penned by a convicted communist spy, was the solution to the conflicts of the world. So listen to a few excerpts from the article. It states that the diplomatic challenge is that states must strike the right balance between self-determination and stability. They're talking about governing the world here. Conflicts where states fight for territories are vanishing. Most armed violence now arises from populations claiming the same territories and or new regimes coming into power. Therefore, the world, now listen real close, the world must be governed as a whole, or a one world government needs to be established. Listen at their version of what should happen. The UN is the necessary mediator for this global management. So they're calling right out here. The UN is the necessary mediator for this global management. They are our world government. The sovereign state, which is the United States at this point, we signed a Declaration of Independence. We're a sovereign state. It says the sovereign state is reshaped both internally and externally. The order is governed by a universal social contract governed by the United Nations. There is no other way to transform the jungle of states into a society. So now they're calling us a jungle of states. But what kind of society do they want to transform us into? Well, they want to transform us into a society that's run by the one world government. It goes on to say that 3 things are necessary to ensure successful global governance. That's the goal, a world government. It states that we must balance the world powers, we must garner regional support, and we must foster trust So we can't just say, we want to have a world government, we're going to implement all these laws and rules and restrictions on you. We want the international community to intervene. You see what I'm saying? It's not near as intrusive when I say international community. We need the international community to intervene instead of saying, we need the global government to come in and take over. See how that sounds? They say, we need the international community to intervene. It's a big difference, but it means the same thing. The article goes on to state, as we adapt to emerging global threats, let's not lose sight of what we have achieved. The UN has largely fulfilled, now think about this. Remember, the United Nations Charter was written by a convicted communist spy, I can't say this enough, to be a socialistic one world governing body. Well, this article says the UN has largely fulfilled the chartered goals, or the United Nations Charter, established in San Francisco, 71 years ago now. And in doing so, has spawned an extensive body of international laws, treaties, norms, practices, and institutions that govern at this point, this article was 2012, that govern most facets of interstate relations. With these apps, the UN Charter has become, get this, the world's central operating system, the motherboard of global governance, making it possible for ideas such as the recent Millennium Development Goals to become policy drivers. Well, you do know that the Millennium Development Goals expired last year, and the new Sustainable Development Agenda was unanimously adopted by 193 UN members. I've talked about it. It's called the Transforming the World, the 2030 Agenda. Well, the new Sustainable Development Goals include 17 specific goals, again, with 169 targets. You say, well, hold on. You already talked about this earlier in the program. Why are you talking about it again? Because these goals, our president, President Obama, signed the United States onto these goals to say, yes, we will adhere to these goals and we will try to enforce them in the United States. And it's already happening. They're already enforcing a lot of these goals. You need to go read these 17 specific goals. Maybe at some point in the future, I'll do a program just on the 17 specific goals, because they get so right down to the nitty-gritty about what they're going to govern, right down into your cities, what you do with your land, how much electricity you can consume. Are you consuming too much electricity? Well, in the future, what they're trying to do is to have sustainable cities, to where, hey, for future generations, we need to have sustainable cities to keep this stuff so that way we'll have it for future generations. But that's really not the goal. The goal is for them to control you. The globalists and internationalists believe in control. We need a world government to control everybody. They don't really care about the resources. That's just a hoax. What they're concerned about is control. Because remember, who's the driver behind this one world government? The Bible tells us Satan is the mastermind behind this whole thing. John prophesied about it 2,000 years ago, that Satan would be the mastermind behind that one world governing body that would be in power just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. So they could care less about the environment. That's all a front. What they're really concerned about is control. Satan doesn't care about our environment. He doesn't care whether there's equality and this, that, and the other. They don't care about any of that stuff. All they're concerned about is, I want to control you. It's what the Bible says, Revelation 13. It says it's trying to garner the allegiance of everybody and get everybody to bow down and worship this one world governing system. Well, in the 17 Sustainable Development Goals with 169 targets, goal number 16 is devoted to making all nations more accountable, with one of the targets seeking to broaden and strengthen the participation of developing countries in the institutions of global governance. They've got it written right in the Sustainable Development Goals. So folks, the United Nations, let me recap, because this is so critical that you understand this. The United Nations, from its inception, until now has always been and always will be a socialistic, one world governing body. And it's very key that you understand that when they say globalization, international community, the New World Order, global governance, all of these different terms mean the same thing. They mean a world governing body. And you say, well, where's this found in the Bible? I told you it was found in Revelation chapter 13. Think of it like this. In Revelation chapter 13, there are three entities that are going to be set up and used by this world, by the Antichrist. There's going to be a world government established, which it's already established right now, and it's really going to come into power at the time of the abomination of desolation, 3.5 years prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. So in Revelation 13, it gives these three entities. The Antichrist is going to lord over a one world governing body. The false prophet, which will be the Pope at that time, will lord over he will be the head of the false religion or the world religion that's established at that time to prop up and lend its support to cause everybody to wonder after this world governing body. And then the third thing is an economic system that will be set up in order to economically sanction everybody and get them to pledge their allegiance to this world governing body. It's the mark of the beast. It's Revelation chapter 13, verse 16 through 18. And so you can look in Revelation 13, it gives the prophecy of all of this. It shows the combined one world governing beast in the very beginning of Revelation chapter 13. In the middle of Revelation chapter 13, it talks about the world religious system that will be set up. And then at the very end of Revelation 13, it talks about the world economic system that we refer to as, if you follow prophecy at all, you refer to it as the mark of the beast. And all of those entities are designed to get everybody in the world. Now we know that there are nations that will not come under the reign of the Antichrist. We know that. The countries of Jordan, the countries of Israel, and we believe the United States won't come under the reign of the Antichrist. Revelation chapter 12 says that Israel is carried away on the wings of a great eagle, where she is nourished in her place for times, and half a times. That's the 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation, just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ in the Battle of Armageddon. The Bible says that Israel is protected by the wings of a great eagle. We believe that's the United States. So what are we talking about today? When you hear the international community, the New World Order, global governance, the process of globalization, they're talking about world government. They're subtly weaving it into the fiber of this world, and it's the world government prophesied by John to be in power just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ.
End of the Age is a production of Endtime Ministries. This broadcast will be available on our website, endtime.com, in the archives section. On our website, you'll also find more information about how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. To reach our operators, call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. Endtime Ministries is partner supported. We would like to say thank you to our partners who made this broadcast possible. To do what Matthew 24:14 said, to reach the world with the gospel of the kingdom.